Okay, welcome everybody. So, hope you had a good lunch, enjoyed the food, didn't get mauled too badly in the exhibition downstairs. So, welcome to the Video for Learning session. So, we've got two brilliant speakers today. Second, we've got Jay from Eon. Jay's going to be talking to us about animation, specifically using that in branching scenarios where you get to be in control. So, that's going to be super cool. Before that, we've got Tom from Nice Media. So probably like me, probably done a bit of video for learning purposes. Tom is an absolute expert. He's literally written a book on it. And he's going to show us how we can get some of those techniques that we love in the films and the dramas that we watch into the videos that we produce. So the way it's going to work is we're going to have a presentation from Tom. Then we're going to have a Q&A session for Tom. Then we'll hear from Jay. We'll have questions for Jay as well. So without further ado, I shall hand over to Tom.
Thank you. Can everyone hear me? Yes. Hi. Well, thanks for coming. My name's Tom. I make video for learning and I specialise in drama. And today I'm going to revolutionise the way that you think about video drama for learning. I'll tell you a bit about my background, how I got here. Then we'll look at some of the common mistakes and misconceptions that are prevalent in drama and L&D before I tell you how we can put them right. Hopefully something's going to happen. Oh, maybe I'm pressing the wrong button. Film and TV drama is an incredibly powerful medium that we all enjoy. It enables us to forget ourselves, to go inside other people's heads, and to live in other worlds. And in the world of learning and development, video drama is incredibly powerful as well, because unlike other sorts of video and learning experience, which are subject to Ebbinghouse's famous forgetting curve that say we forget 50% of anything we learn within an hour, drama can counter this because it works emotionally. So why then does video drama in learning have a poor reputation? When we think of training films, it's not the same thing that you think of when you think of Netflix. After a lifetime making video in L&D, I thought I'd give this some serious attention. And what I discovered, I hope might surprise you. What's wrong with video drama in L&D has nothing to do with poor budgets or boring subject matter. As long as you've got a functional budget, you can design an engaging drama to fit it, and as long as your subject is one that people can have disagreements about, it can make a good subject for a drama. No, the problem is more basic than that. The problem is that whilst plenty of drama is produced in the sector, there's very little knowledge in L&D about how drama works, the very fundamentals of the medium. And the result is a lot of poor quality drama being produced by very clever people who don't know they're doing it wrongly. So that is a fixable problem, I thought. It's an L&D problem. So I wrote a little book, here it is, Watch and Learn, and it's designed to share the essential knowledge that you need to design video drama for learning for all our colleagues in the world of L&D. And it became the first step in what's become a bit of a mission to share its conceptual toolkit with the L&D community. The good news is that the fundamentals of drama, a bit like chess, are not difficult to grasp, although you can, of course, spend a lifetime becoming a master. So let's start by looking at the misuse of drama, because that accounts for a lot of poor user experience. And if we can just work out what drama is no good for, we should be able to make a big change quite quickly. And I can tell you straight away that drama is no good for teaching procedures and processes. There are other forms of video that are absolutely ideal for sharing best practice. Now, what drama is good for is emotional engagement with pretty much any subject. So emotional engagement, so much learning theory and research is focused on retention of factual information. You might be forgiven for thinking that there's no place for emotion in the world of workplace learning. But effective learning, which focuses on how learners feel is increasingly becoming central. And one of its stellar exponents is Mary Helen Imordino Yang. And she's remarked that emotions in learning are often thought of as messy toddlers in a china shop running around and breaking stuff, whereas in fact they're more like the shelving system that holds up the porcelain, with the porcelain a metaphor for cognition. So put simply, we need an emotional framework to allow us to make sense of lessons learned and apply them to the real world. And an important process here that's been largely overlooked is that of transcendent thinking. This is when we think deeply to join up our new learning with our existing knowledge and understanding. This type of thinking leverages procedural and semantic memories in service of broader knowledge. It's a necessary process that we all do to make sense of learning. Of course, everyone makes up their own shelving system, as it were, but it's in the interests of L&D to facilitate and guide that process. So before I go on to tell you about the dramatic technique necessary to stimulate transcendent thinking, let's have a look at some of those common mistakes and misconceptions I was talking about. So the first of these is using drama for procedural instruction, as I've already mentioned. Drama can teach a few things exceedingly memorably, but only if we use them to articulate an emotional journey. Another one is learning points as dialogue, which we quite often see. If you see a video with dialogue used to spout learning points, it comes across like a lecture, and that's a big turn-off for people. Exposition, mistaken for storytelling. I find that quite often designers write drama a bit like an explanation of what happened. Exposition is tell, don't show. You do need a little bit of that in drama, but we want to keep it to a minimum. So let's have a look at a couple of short clips from an old learning drama now and see how many of those mistakes you might spot. Sorry about the blur, that's for contractual reasons.
Here it is. Sanctions imposed on a leading professional services firm.
What did they do?
Some issue with the business relationship with one of their clients. Krish didn't want to go into specifics, or said it was too stressful to talk about. Here, let me read this. Flaxon Rhine, one of the country's largest professional, blah blah, suffers a huge fine, embarrassing end to their audit of ADV Giant Inc., the large US advertising agency. The US Securities and Exchange Commission has sanctioned FR $2 million for engaging in a prohibited business relationship with Dizzy Media, one of ADV's UK subsidiaries. Well, it appears they didn't do the appropriate checks to enable them to identify the relationship between Dizzy Media and ADV, the US parent. Now, although F&R has no audit relationship with Dizzy Media, it does audit the US parent. So, the go-to-market relationship resulted in a prohibited business relationship between these two parties.
So anyone spot any of those errors in that? Yeah, well, some of us have made them. So let's go on to the next common mistake, and that is reluctance to show emotion or conflict. Now, that scene wasn't very emotional, and I do find a lot of clients are quite nervous about showing much emotion in their drama, and particularly nervous about conflict, lest that reflect badly on their organisation. This is completely understandable, but what you have to realise is that emotion and conflict is actually what drama consists of, essentially. So if you get rid of those, you get rid of the drama. The art is to create drama that includes those, but doesn't reflect badly on the organisation. Over-enthusiasm for big emotions. Well, at the opposite end of the spectrum, people sometimes think, gosh, if I've got extreme emotions, action and violence, I'm really getting my bang for my buck and the best out of the medium. And the same goes for every other sort of bang and whistle and special effect, which brings me to over-enthusiasm for flashy techniques. So don't get me wrong, we all enjoy, and there's a place for shock, horror, CGI, explosions, drone shots. The problem comes when we put our enthusiasm for them before a sober consideration of the problem we're trying to solve. And let's not forget, even pretty amazing filmmakers get carried away with this kind of thing. Here's some mega budget spectacular flops that we might learn from. It's not the script it's not the budget that makes a film, it's the script, it's the design. So now we learned what doesn't work, let's have a look at what does. At home, when we watch TV drama, we do so for relaxation. So we tend to think of it as a passive activity, whereas in fact, drama only works when it makes us active. And it does this by showing people, characters in difficult, challenging situations and prompting us to imagine, if that were me, what would I do? And this stimulates a type of transcendent thinking as we consider the possibilities. Here's an example that you're probably familiar with. A young woman is attacked by a shark and killed. The sheriff wants to close the beach, but for the sake of tourism, the mayor refuses. Later, it's a perfectly normal day at the seaside with nothing happening. But we are inside the sheriff's head, thinking along with him. With no dialogue, just a juxtaposition of images, we create our own meaning. Is there a shark in the water? Why isn't he doing something? Can't the sheriff override the mayor? What the hell is happening here? So there we go, that's a bit of transcendent thinking as exemplified by Jaws. A good place to find dramatic content, subject matter, is in the grey area. What the heck is that, you may ask? Well, the grey area can be found in that overlap between public and private at work. Suppose you spot a colleague who's behaving strangely and she's skipping over compliance requirements in her work. It's nothing serious, but if not addressed, it could escalate and that could reflect back on the team, maybe worse. If you report her, you could get her into trouble, but you can see, she's not really responding to what you're saying. There's obviously something going on for her. This is a classic grey area that we might use to illustrate a compliance issue, for example. Drama is absolutely no good at all at telling people what to do and what to think, but it's excellent at asking people to think about hypothetical situations and to reflect on them. To create scenes that draw us into a character's decision-making, we need an element of storytelling. Now, storytelling is ancient, it's primal, but for this reason, a lot of airy-fairy stuff is spoken about it, and that's a bit unfortunate because it can distract us from the everyday nuts and bolts of story that we need. Here's the classic story paradigm, beginning, middle, and end, set up confrontation and resolution with a few stopping points along the way. You might sum it up by saying a story is a narrative about a character dealing with an obstacle in order to achieve an important goal. Today's a very special day. Does anyone know what it is? Indeed, it is Star Wars Day. So let's use the original Star Wars movie to illustrate this classic story paradigm. So we begin with a setup as we introduce the characters and their story world. And now an inciting incident as Luke's family is killed presents a challenge that unbalances his world. Now Luke embarks on a quest in order to try to put the world back into balance. And that quest culminates in him leading a team of X-Wing fighters on a mission to blow up the Death Star. But does Luke come all this way for nothing? All the other fighters are shot down. This is his crisis of decision. Then he hears the voice of his mentor.
Use the Force, Luke.
And the young audience reflect on growing up and trusting themselves. Luke rejects computer guidance and connects with his own power, the Force. And now the climactic action of vindication. So that moment of learning to trust yourself as you reflect on becoming an adult is a transcendent thinking moment in Star Wars. So that's already well in a Hollywood classic, you may say, but what about in a corporate setting? Well, in this scene we begin with a setup. The audience know what's happening here, it's familiar to them. A team is putting together a bid. Now a challenge as one guy provokes his colleague to break a rule, sending privileged information by private email to hit a deadline. That's a grey area. And now he's got a crisis of decision, which gives us a bit of transcendent thinking as we think about the possibilities, what could go wrong. And now the climactic action as he makes the wrong choice. So moments of decision are the most powerful to stimulate transcendent thinking in an audience. I like to think of them as moments of pure engagement. The more those moments feature, the more hard those decisions are, the more they resemble a dilemma in which neither option is a good choice, the more they will absorb your audience and the more they'll shed light on your subject matter. And our job as designers is to create as many of these moments, large and small, with a minimum of story to hold them together. So finally, a real-world example. We work with Health Education England and Safeguarding Adults National Network to make some drama about adult safeguarding for a MOOC, which is a great place for drama, I think, because drama can get people talking. Now, the client team were very keen to show scenes of violence and abuse because, of course, adult safeguarding is a serious matter. You want to do it justice. But I was nervous of this because showing violence doesn't necessarily teach us, give us insight into it. Plus, it's expensive to stage. So I was fortunate that the client team were very responsive to what seemed like a counterintuitive suggestion. And we decided to tell the story of a meeting, a multidisciplinary meeting to investigate the case of a young woman in their care who had died. So in this design, we didn't see any horror, but as Jules Verne said, the most poignant dramas are those of thought. It was also a cost-effective design because it featured 6 actors in a single location, filmed in a single day. It was a little bit like a courtroom drama, and as such, it needed a lot of exposition, but every piece of information revealed told us more about the reason for and therefore the meaning of this unnecessary death. So it added to the drama. There's also a lot of grey area there, so we see many small, difficult decisions, each of which draw us in. So let's just have a look at a 2-minute clip from what ended up as about 20 minutes of drama.
So on the 19th, we'll all be taking part in a Safeguarding Adults review into the circumstances of Sophia Gillespie's death. So the aim here today is to collate information and to discuss what will contribute to the health element of the SAR on behalf of each of our services.
In my experience, it's all about collective learning. Coming up with recommendations is nothing to worry about.
Thank you, Patrick. So Natalie, can we start with you? As Sophia's GP, you'll have been her first point of contact, of course.
Actually, I wasn't her first point of contact,
Okay. Well, is there any information you can share with us about her diagnosis or her medical history?
Of course. Sophia was referred to my practice by the mental health team about 4 years ago. I understand that initially she presented to you with concerns about low mood and substance abuse. Apparently she was treated for drug dependency several years previously, but couldn't recall who by or where. She has a 6-year-old daughter who lives in the same town, but with her paternal grandparents. No mention of a father, no ongoing relationships.
Right, so could we have explored her domestic situation in more detail, do you think?
It would have helped us understand her risk factors a bit better.
The record contains one mention of rough sex with a boyfriend, and there's a reference to strangulation. But apparently, Sophia understood the meaning of consent and agreed that this was a consensual sexual activity.
Did she have the mental capacity to agree to that? I thought she had a learning disability.
Well, there's no record of any formal mental capacity assessment. These are locum's notes, but he's...
I don't think Sophia did have a learning disability. That wasn't my experience of her.
Was there a formal diagnosis?
There was a query about a mild learning disability when she first registered, but no confirmation, no.
Was there a reason you didn't look into that? I would have thought professional curiosity would have made...
As I was about to say, the locum who registered Sophia left the practice a while ago. I don't know his rationale.
So that story about Sophia Galescu became a central theme that ran throughout the whole MOOC, and the course was the winner of the 2021 Learning Excellence Awards for Healthcare. So we're really fortunate to be involved with that project, which was very enjoyable. So thank you so much. I really do hope I have revolutionised the way that you think about video drama in learning. If you want to know more, take a picture of this slide, pick up a copy of my book for free on the way out from my colleague Georgia there. And I think we've got a time for a few bits of Q&A now. So,
Thank you very much.
thank you.
Superb, Tom.
Thank you.
So, you heard right. He's giving away free books at the back, which distills down, all of Tom's experience into a brilliant book. There isn't one for everybody, so you just have to fight it out. So we've got time now. We've got about 10 minutes or so for questions. So what would you like to ask Tom about to do with video and learning?
I might take a seat at this point.
Got a gentleman at the back there.
Sorry, I couldn't quite hear that. How much does the Oh, the videography, right. Well, I think put it this way. I think there's different ways of looking at it. So really, production value isn't very important to viewers. It's important in terms of like sending a unconscious message that you are taking your audience seriously, if you like. That's and also you are a big, important company and this kind of thing. So in that way, I think that's where production value to me says something. But in terms of sort of visual grammar, that's important in telling an emotional story. But in terms of, having the best costume, the best lighting and all that stuff, that's of less important in the learning aspect, if you like. I don't know if that's what you want to know.
Gentleman here.
Thank you for that. I was wondering, what are some of the most common mistakes you see in branching video?
Branching video, oh golly. I've got to say, I find interactive video it's the hardest thing because you've really got, you've got the ordinary challenges and then you've got to make it work as well while it branches. So I think to me, I'm not, I think in a way the problem is, and you see this in a lot of video, a lot of learning design, is that it's more concentration on the functionality of the interaction than the content. So it's a bit like a boring church service in which you're told to stand up and sit down all the time to keep you awake, but you're not concentrating on the sermon. That's one of the problems I would say that you see. I don't know if that answers it enough, but it's a very complicated subject, but that's a simple answer.
Any more questions? I've got one, actually. So the example that you showed at the end there, where 6 actors, one location, shoot for one day, how much time did you spend in the planning of it, in the pre-production?
Oh, golly. The producer's standing at the back there. Shall we ask her?
Yeah. It's about 12 weeks. Uh-huh. So a huge amount of planning to get to that quality of output, yeah.
Yeah.
Very good, thank you. Does anybody else like me want to watch Jaws and Star Wars now?
Hi there. I just wondered, we make video within our organisation, and we often use people within our organisation to be the actors, to not just save on cost, but sometimes they're the people that are in that situation for real and know all the ins and outs. Do you have any advice about how to, I don't know, bring them into the video making process and tell them to be less nervous, or would you always recommend to use professional actors to really get the impact that you want from learning?
Well, obviously, I would prefer to use professional actors. How we sometimes do it, actually, if you've got, so for example, if you're shooting in a like Tesco's or something, you want to have a scene with an abusive customer, you could use that. In that case, a real checkout person might respond well in a sort of a scene with an actor, and then the actor can hold the emotion while the checkout person is kind of like meant to be not emotional, and that's also part of their job that they're already familiar with. So that's a good way to use non-actors. If you just want to make a drama with no actors because you can't afford it, then, I mean, I've put some things in the book, but mainly you have to know how to direct people is one of the things. And there's really 3 things you need to know for that. One is don't do result directions. Result directions are be happy, be sad. It's got to be a verb. Be, so like attack, defend, flirt, these kind of, an active verb. The other ones are adjustments, when you say, imagine you're talking to your mum or your priest or something. And then the other one is context. So you say, oh, I've just come from a meeting, or you're tired, or, this person dissed you in the last meeting and now you hate them, that kind of thing. So that's the only advice I can give in this short period, I think. That's going to be functional.
Great question, though. It's tough. I helped out free of charge on like a low-budget film set, and watching the actors on that, and the ability for them to stay in the moment and just do take after take after take direction from somebody just to change their position or a little bit more like that. It was incredible to see up close. It's a real skill.
We've actually moved away recently in my department, my organisation, from dramatised clip videos, which we used to have in our learning, including branching actually, and we've moved to forum theatre practices where we have a supplier we work with based in Brighton, and basically we have participative audience sessions where they redirect the actors to show the behaviours that they want to see, and we've implemented that with our new performance management approach, which we've completely redesigned this year. And it's been very successful. So I wondered if that's, because forum theatre hasn't been mentioned at all. So I wondered if that's something you've got experience in doing or working with organisations?
Well, I work with actors who do it, so I kind of know a little bit about it from that.
Yeah,
and obviously, yeah, I've not personally
I just
done
thought
that.
I'd mention it because it was, for us anyway, I don't think it would
Yeah,
work
yeah.
for everybody. It's been very
No, obviously I can see
successful.
it has value, and I can see it's like it can be spontaneously work in relation to individuals and individual circumstances. So
Yeah.
I guess the difference is perhaps that if you record something, you can standardise it, you can sort of sign it off and send it out into the world.
Yeah.
Whereas, it's more sort of labour intensive, if you like.
It
but
is,
but
yeah.
equally, it's more various. So
Yeah, the feedback we've had actually from delegates has been great in terms of impact, because actually they can test behaviours in a real time exercise, whereas I find video clips and I appreciated your presentation. What I've found is that it's very much open to interpretation. So that video that you showed us from the social care environment could be interpreted, I think, in many different ways in terms of the message that they're trying to put across. So was this about risk? Was this about liability? Was this about care practices? I mean, I've worked in the care sector for many years.
Yeah, well, I'd just say that how that is used and how video is often used is, like drama is. So that was a MOOC, and it had mediated discussion so that it raises questions and that gets discussion going. And then those are, so it's a kind of very like a forum piece in a way, but you can do it remotely. And we've done something for, the ambulance service, for example, which is similarly used, but they use it in live sessions. So they show a bit and then they discuss it and this kind of thing.
Yeah.
But then I suppose the other thing you can show is stuff that you can't have in a live event, because you could show an ambulance, whatever, But I suppose you can still pretend you're in an ambulance. So, yeah, that, it's swings and roundabouts. I'm not, that's all I can say about that. Yeah.
Wonderful. Any more final last questions before we're on to Jay? Nope. Okay, great. So, Jay from Eon, looking at animation and branching scenarios.
Hello. Oh, this feels really awkward now. Brilliant. Hi. Yeah, I am Jay. I've been at Eon UK for about 14 years now, and in learning and development roles for coming up to 2 decades, which is getting scary, at different companies in retail, telecommunications, and of course, energy companies as well. I've always liked the idea of stepping outside of my comfort zone and saying that I have spoken at somewhere like a Learning Tech conference, but I can very much say I have not enjoyed saying I am going to be speaking at a Learning Tech conference. The past tense is going to be is an important factor. I think it's important to note I would never describe myself as an animator, and my drawing skills leave a lot to be desired, though my daughters think I'm the best drawer in the world, bless them. Okay, I originally joined Eon to design and deliver training sessions for engineers on wind farms, biomass, and back in the day, fossil fuel power stations. So it was on the computer systems that they used to keep the power generating. So it was very technical and pretty dry material. But more recently, for the last 3 years, I've taken on a new role as a digital learning specialist, or the digital learning specialist in Eon UK. So I sit in the central people development team, or L&D, and it does allow me to get my hands dirty from time to time with design work, and more importantly, to help people with theirs as well. I look after the various deployment platforms and various content creation tools that we use as well, and the strategies for using them. And a key part of that has been animation. In the past, we've had a couple of people, including myself, who could dabble a little bit. So we would use the more complex, powerful tools like Adobe After Effects and going further back into Flash. The results were questionable and took a very long time to do as well. Our team was shrinking, so we've moved from about 50 to 60 headcount down to about 10 people now. And it's with our strategy, it's more around getting our subject matter experts to be able to create their own materials. So we've needed to introduce new tools, and we desperately needed something that would be able to be picked up much more quickly and make it much more accessible. So I am here to talk about animation, and I will be going into a particular, an interactive branching scenario one based around a compliance piece of e-learning on fire evacuation. But before that, you might have noticed, or you might have just chucked them away as you sat down, there are a couple of little bits of paper on some of the seats. I was expecting tables, so I didn't actually print that many. But I do want to make this slightly interactive, just asking a couple of questions as we go along. So there are some QR codes on some of the chairs, which you can scan with your mobile phones. If you don't see one of those, you can run up to here and scan that big one if you like, or if you just go to slido.com, you can join in with the PIN number that's on here. So 926376. I'll leave that up for a sec. Any success? It won't be saying a lot when you get in. It'll be something about there's no Q&As or something like that. Okay. Oh, we've already got stuff in there. Yeah, partly for my own curiosity and partly to check that it's working, if we could go to this first one. So what word or words come into mind when you think of animation? So yeah, cartoons, engaging, fun. It seems to be the most one. Donkey, love it. There may be a profanity filter on this. My InfoSec department is quite hot on these things. So if you can avoid swearing, that would be cool. Brilliant, that seems to be working. Okay, so question 2. Are you using animation in learning at the moment? Looks like I'll be preaching to the converted for most of you. Cool, that's interesting, thank you. And if you're not, what's stopping you? I really want that one to get top. Could keep going for ages. Yeah, the lack of skill in team was one of the key issues that we were facing, which changed our strategy. So why does animation work for us? We did already produce a fair amount of video content already. So we did lots of talking heads, video explainers, as well as how-to guides and so on. And we attempted some drama as well, and the quality of them, it's fair to say, was a little bit mixed. It's really dependent on the people that you get on camera. So some were absolutely brilliant, others hated every single second of being there, and the results showed that. We had toyed with the idea of using more animation, so we did start a couple of trials and pilots with some new, simpler, more accessible online tools. And during those trials, one of the key advantages was purely and simply the logistics of it. For our videos, we'd already switched to using mobile phones as cameras rather than looking around the big, heavy cameras. But we still needed to bring around the lighting, the microphones, the tripods, and simply getting everybody who was involved in the same place at the same time. Whereas with animations, they could be made quickly by one person with a laptop and internet connection. Another factor was revisions. And when you're talking about using people from the business to make videos, I know someone asked a question about it, this is just a few second clip that's safe for work of a blooper reel for a video from a recruitment course.
Action.
Okay.
Surely you can't say something.
Hi, I'm Jess.
Good.
Hi Jamie, thanks for coming in today.
Hi Jamie, I'm Hannah. Nice to meet you.
Oh, I didn't say who my name was.
That was good as well.
The actual full-length bleeper, I had to stop it there because swearing gets involved. The full-length bleeper reel for this was far longer than any video in the entire package. It was about 15 minutes. If you think they're bad at saying hello, you should hear them trying to say goodbye. We had to do 14 different takes to get that bit sorted. It's not just about mistakes, though. If the process for something does change, it was really hard for us using people in the business if we needed to change one word or a sentence or two because something has changed on the systems or whatever else, trying to get those two people wearing the same clothes, wearing the same jewellery, back in the same room at the same kind of day with the same kind of weather outside, just to make certain that the lighting looks the same, was pretty much nigh on impossible. So quite often, we just have to start again from scratch. So when we did need to make a change to this particular package, we did switch it up to animations. We also do find that it's people are much more happy to provide a voiceover or a narration than to step in front of camera. Their voice is fine, being on screen, and I'm exactly the same, is not something they want to do. Language as well. So some of our content is for an international audience. So again, rather than having to reshoot live action, dubbing voiceovers over or relying on subtitles, we can simply replace the language. Cartoon characters.
Good afternoon. Bonjour. Guten Tag. Buongiorno.
Yeah, generally cartoon characters don't really care whether they're speaking Polish, German, Hungarian, or whatever else. And simply put, it's engaging. So our audience engagement increased. We already knew that video was our most engaged with type of content anyway, and now that we added animation into the mix, that increased massively. We haven't abandoned live action video and talking heads in any way at all. It's still important, but the flexibility of animation, the speed of which we can produce it and react to things has been invaluable, particularly during the pandemic. It's enabled us to do stuff we simply would never have been able to do before, because we didn't have the budget to do that, because our budget is always the same, it's 0. So we've used it for animated infographics, short explainers, smaller pieces of larger learning packages, and of course full-blown interactive courses as well, which does bring us to the branching project I'm here to talk about. It was around the fire evacuation procedure, so really scintillating, exciting stuff. But it was a key change, so it was a really important one that we needed to do. It was back in 2019, so it's pre-pandemic, and we'd already started to move to a more hybrid way of working. We couldn't rely on the dedicated, trained floor workers being in the site when the fire alarm went off. So they did need to try to move to a model that everybody could help to clear the building if they needed to. So we did look at the more traditional click and show type courses, so using, I'm sure you'll be familiar with this. These are the kind of information slides we were provided by the subject matter experts to try and translate that into something more interesting. But it needed to be memorable. It's unusual in that whilst everyone at the impacted sites needed to do it, they were really looking for the 10 to 20% of people who would actually step up and get involved and help clear the building if they needed to. They weren't expecting absolutely everybody to do this. So it was very important to make it engaging. We did look at live action stuff, abandoned that idea quite quickly. You could probably tell why. We did look at the idea of using 360-degree photos as well. So kind of like a Google Street View, but indoors. But again, we abandoned that due to budget reasons. So it had to engage. It'd be absolutely pointless if it ended up as yet another tick box race to the end kind of compliance course. So to do that, we determined it needed to be interactive, and it also had to be scalable and easily amendable. There's a couple of sites that were involved in the pilot, but there was a possibility that more sites would take this on, so we had to be able to tweak it very quickly and easily to adjust it for those sites. And we also wanted it to be real, which may sound strange when we're talking about cartoon animation, but it simply allowed us to do scenarios that we couldn't possibly do in live action. So dealing with a photocopier that's on fire without actually setting a photocopier on fire, somebody getting electrocuted. It's much simpler to do those kind of situations in animation. Now, I did play a lot of computer games as a kid, and I still do. We didn't have a TV as I was growing up, so I was reading a lot of books, and I did like those choose-your-own-adventure books. Loved playing lots of games as well. And I wanted to create something similar, but much simpler. So interactive with simple puzzles and choices. But the key thing was allowing people to experiment. One of my pet hates in online learning is when you get asked a multiple choice question, you put the answer in. You may not have even looked at the answers really, you just put it in to see what happens, and you get told that's not quite right, try again. You try again, you then get told, well done, you've got that right, you've picked that up brilliantly. There's no real learning in that, it's just attempt to get to the end. I wanted the option for people to choose the wrong option and for that to change the feedback that they get at the end. So for the learning to be the choice, allow people to experiment and react as they probably would do, as opposed to how they felt that they should do. I also wanted to borrow other elements from games as well, so choosing your own character, which was made possible purely by using animations, and also the use of an in-game map, notes, and even chucked a couple of Easter eggs in there as well for people who really like to explore too. I need some water. Oh. Now, in order for any of this to work, we still needed to be able to utilize a story and to still fit in with that classic 3-act structure that Tom mentioned earlier. Essentially, the story must have a beginning, a middle, and an end, and pretty much all mainstream films and novels will follow that. And what is it? So Act 1 is the setup. So the introduction, where the status quo is introduced, the characters, so it might describe life as we already know it. But at the end of the act, there will be an inciting incident. So in Star Wars, it's Luke's aunt and uncle getting killed, but someone getting kidnapped or whatever else. In ours, it was a fire alarm going off.
Is it Wednesday already?
Wait a minute. This area hasn't been cleared.
Which then moves us into Act 2, the confrontation. So this is the chase, the ups and downs, the minor setbacks and victories, and in our case, the different scenarios. So the majority of the story is in Act 2, and for ours, we really wanted this to be non-linear, and for the choices that people made to have an impact when it came to the final act, which is the resolution. So this is where the hero gets the boy or the girl, the fight is won. Will often feature a call to arms, the new bliss, or how things are going to be in the future. For ours, the resolution is the debrief that happens after a fire evacuation has happened, and we needed the feedback on that to change based on the choices that they had made during Act 2. Essentially, I made life a lot more difficult for myself than I intended to at the start of this. So to give a couple of examples of how that worked. Now, before I play this, the introduction has already been covered, so the players selected their character already. We're looking at the clipboard. So this is the in-learning menu. It's also a replica of the clipboard that they would be using in real life as well, and where they'd get all of their information on.
Select the first area you want to check.
Bob, is that you? We need to evacuate now.
What? I'm not going anywhere. It won't be real. Waste of time. I've deadlines. I'm a big deal.
Okay, so at this point, the learner is given the choice of what to do. One of these is technically the correct answer, but it doesn't end. It doesn't end in a replay, a repeat. It will just continue as it would if they were doing it for real. So what we're going to do depends on you. Oh, come on. Good. Just in case it catches up, I'm going to skip over that. So you are coming with me.
You are coming with me. He's all yours.
Which was technically the incorrect answer, but it does continue. They'll get feedback on there at the later. It then continues, and Bob has left the building now. If we had done what's supposed to be the right answer, but less fun, it would have changed it.
I can't force you, Bob. I'll let the evacuation controller know you're in here.
And again, it will continue, but Bob is there. Okay, so for most of the scenarios, the information was available on the clipboard if they read it, which not all learners did, of course. Except for one example, which did cause the most controversy when it came to the feedback. Got more comments on this one than anything else. So in this case, the building has been checked and cleared, and everyone is now heading back inside.
Stop! What's the problem? Seriously, I sit 2 desks away from you. I left it on my desk.
And the eagle-eyed might have noticed that in the intro he was indeed sat 2 desks away from her. So this was the question: do we let Dave in? You lot are harsh. I like it. Cool. All right then. Security it is. Oh, if I press the right button. Oh no, wrong one.
That's ridiculous. That's the last time I get you a coffee.
He's just as rude if you do let him in as well. Okay, which then brings us to the climax, Act 3. And the feedback then changed. So this is a couple of extracts from that based on the choices that we made. So I'm given a couple of the feedbacks based on what's technically the incorrect answers. So with Bob, we shouldn't have forced him out.
Office B. Oh, Bob. I appreciate your enthusiasm in bringing him out, but we can't force anyone to leave. If it happens again, just let me know where they are.
And Dave.
Oh, and Dave complained he thinks the power went to your head. You only need to challenge people without a pass if you don't recognise them. We're not trying to annoy people.
And if we had let Dave in, it just simply would not be mentioned at this point, because why would it be? Okay, so that was the package we ended up going live with in the pilots, and it's gone out further since. And did it work? We had a plan. So 3 months after the course had been assigned to everyone at the pilot sites, they were going to run a test. So we're going to set the fire alarm off. All the dedicated floor walkers would step back and sit on their hands and not doing anything, and they would then see what happened. Now, that was scheduled for the last week in March in 2020, which was, of course, when the first lockdown started. So we've not properly returned to the office yet. I have only been in about 3 times in the last 3 years, so we've not managed to run that test properly yet, sadly. But we can look at the more generic feedback that evaluation sheets that we've had people fill in who've been involved. And one of the questions that we ask is, what could have been done differently to improve your experience through this learning package? And this is genuinely the first piece of feedback I read. So if you can't see that, that says not designed the course for toddlers, which was genuinely absolutely gutting. But it is seriously something you do need to consider when you are designing training courses and using animations to make certain that the tone and the feel of it is appropriate for what you're trying to achieve and what the subject matter is. Thankfully, that sentiment was far outweighed by the general positivity that came in. I was one of the playable characters, so I do still need to, sadly our feedback is anonymous, so I'll never know who enjoyed setting me on fire. We do also ask for NPS feedback as well. In the initial pilot stage, it was actually higher than this. We were hitting in the 70s, so it was about plus 72, but over the first 12 months, we're getting to about 64. It's dipped slightly now, and looking at the feedback, the main reason for that is people are working from home, but they're still being required to do the course because apparently they still work at those sites. Where we have taken a similar approach with animations in learning for other compliance training, so for GDPR and others, we've had similar feedback and similar sets of NPS results as well. So it seemed to work for us. So just to round off with a few tips. First, it's easier than you might think it is. If you don't need a complete custom bespoke style, there are plenty of online tools and packages that make it really simple to achieve animations like these. You can start small as well, and short is a key thing. So use it for infographics, small communications pieces. It can enhance a bigger package, a little part of something bigger. It doesn't have to be a full standalone piece. What it's not so brilliant for, though, is really complex, detailed stuff when you need that complexity and that detail. Animation is brilliant at simplifying complex things, but when you need that detail, it really doesn't work. You end up with so much text on the screen or just a really, really long, boring animation. And use audio. animation can be silent, and for little GIFs, of course, that works. But for longer pieces, using audio and absolutely key narration and voiceover, and even sound effects, it can really enhance what you're trying to do. But as with anything, don't go overboard. Annoying backgrounds and over loud background music and comedy sounds can annoy people more than you expect it to. A story, this is kind of two parts. So use stories. So always use stories where possible, but crucially, storyboard. So it's much easier to amend and revise animations as opposed to live action stuff, but it's even easier if you don't have to do that and you've got everything approved and storyboarded up front. And finally, if possible, make it interactive. It does using animations, and again, not just full-blown entire animation branching scenario courses. They can work really well, but even if you're just using a short animated GIF, which is then just providing a rollover for something else, just that little bit of movement on the screen can really help. And that's me. How was I doing time-wise?
So, absolutely awesome. I mean, two great sessions there, both loads of practical tips for all of us. So, of course, using Slido, people have been posting their questions in Slido, haven't they? They have. So, the top one, and quite a lot of people want to know this, is specifically which tools do you use?
There are plenty available. The one that we found, and I'm not affiliated with them in any way, I need to state, is Vyons. They were formerly known as GoAnimate, but there's others out there. There's Animaker, there's Simple Show, there's Powtoons, and you'll probably find that some of these people are downstairs at the exhibition. But most of them will also offer, because they're online, they will offer you a free trial to go and have a little play and see how it works for you.
Okay, so next up relates to that first dispiriting
I've made
feedback
your job really
comment.
easy, haven't I?
Yes, it's okay now. That first dispiriting comment that you got. So this one is, how do you strike the right balance of professionalism to critics that say that animations are childish, especially in relation to compliance when people already feel patronised? So how do you strike that balance?
It is a tricky one, but one, switching it around slightly, I always used to try, and this is going back to the days when I used to train groups of engineers in the training room, I would always try and please the minority, so the people who weren't interested, who didn't want to be there in the first place, who were always going to complain about something anyway. But they were the people I focused my attention on because I really wanted them to like me. It took me a long time, probably about 10 years in, before I realised I should be focusing on everybody else who was actually engaged and wanted to be there rather than that. And it's a similar for this. You are always going to get, and as long as it's a little minority there who think that cartoons are childish, yes, but the advantages of the speed of them, the flexibility, the ability to change it up. And if you want it to be a really serious tone, you can still do that with animations. It's just that you would probably need to create them yourselves rather than using the online tools.
Very good. And what have we got up next? I think that's another tools question. Oh, what are your biggest tips to streamline the process? So I'm fairly confident in After Effects, but struggle to fit in time to produce meaningful products.
I can give no tips on After Effects whatsoever. YouTube is always useful for those kind of things. The key thing really is the storyboarding up front, and what I always used to fall down on when it came to using After Effects and the more complex stuff is getting bogged down on 1 second. And I would spend absolutely ages, hours, trying to make that one particular effect look just right. And once you've got over that, it makes it so much easier if you can just get the whole thing down.
I mean, there's another question here on timescales. I mean, can you give an indication? Is it possible to say, like, for a minute's worth of animation, it's this many days of your time? Are you able to give some sort of indication?
Yeah, anywhere between 15 minutes, 30 minutes. And now it depends on what the thing is, but again, with the tools that we use, they're really simple.
Yeah.
For this one, which did have a lot of videos in, I can't remember how many minutes it was in total. It probably took me 4 weeks in total as a one person working on that to produce that particular e-learning package. But Yeah, Rosie's in the room as well, and I'm just going to call her out now. She uses these tools as well. It's not something that you need to be an expert on. You can create things really quickly. What takes more time is polishing it afterwards. So it depends on what you're trying to achieve, to what level it needs to be. But you can bang these out is probably the wrong term, but you can get them done very, very quickly.
So there's an interesting one here about how do you get around making avatars of people that are quite restrictive and could show them in a negative way, for example, body size. Huh.
I have also fallen, not exactly the same, but I've fallen foul of a similar thing. There are different styles, as you know, in the tool. So one of the styles just ignores that everybody has the same body type, which is the style that you're looking at here. So everybody looks like a bean pole. With the other one, when you can choose body size, which I think is a good thing because it's got a more diversity in there, is when you're designing them, I have done the same. I have designed someone, I thought he looked really good. And then I showed it to them, and they were really offended because, in their words, you've made me look like a mad professor, which wasn't the intention. Since then, whenever I design someone, they are on the phone with me. They design themselves, essentially. So they choose what body type they want. They choose their face. They choose their hair. Does it always end up looking exactly like them? Yeah, perhaps not, but it's what they want to look like as opposed to what I think they look like.
A question about how did you go about making that animation interactive?
The other tool that we used is Articulate Storyline, but similarly you could do it with many other e-learning interactive packages as well. So anything that can handle variables and interactive hotspots.
And see, you've set a rod for your own back here. If I was just going around with a mic, you would have had 3 questions. You've made my job really easy, your job really hard. I think it's great. So when should you not use animation? Is there anything where you really think it wouldn't be appropriate?
Depending on the tone of your animation, no. As long as you get the tone right. And for the more serious things, you may want to consider not using people. So you don't have to. We use the avatars a lot, but you don't have to use them. And that can help for the more serious things, I would say.
I'm going to throw an easier one now, which is a genuine question from the audience. I like your shirt. Where did you get it? So, what's that? It's a Burton. It's a Burton shirt. So there you go. Very good.
I definitely bought it myself. Yeah, it wasn't my wife.
So this is a nice one. Do you have to be a creative person to be able to make animations?
It helps. With our model, we do loan out our seats, so subject matter experts in the business can borrow the seats we have for the licenses that we have to create the animations that they need. The results that we then see aren't necessarily the best, but as people get more used to the tool, I find that quite tricky because I've always been quite creative. So I'm going to ask Rosie, actually. Rosie?
I mean, I've done a bit of research into creativity over the years, and we're all creative because we're all humans. It's just some people have had a chance to exercise it more. So it's just as Jay said there, it is just a case of practice and honing those skills. There's a question about post-production. So do you do any post-production of the animation before finalization? Or as they come out of
with these, other than when we're putting them into something else, no, not really. As they come out of the tool is how they're used.
Very good. I think we've covered off all those questions. Has anybody got, here we are, I'm going to do a bit of roving now.
Didn't use technology, doesn't count.
I'll do it.
Hello. Very simple question, I think. Well, the first one, did you cut your own hair in the first slide? That's a yes. So we're looking to hire an animator or an e-learning creative designer at the minute. and we have absolutely zero experience or expertise within our team. So what would be the top asset or the top skill that you'd go for? The other associated question was, do we choose the platform and then take the designer, or take the designer and then the platform?
Yeah, if you're hiring an animator, that's a very different thing to hiring someone like me who isn't an animator. So someone who is an animator would be able to use proper software, for want of a better word, and I would expect them to have artistic skills and be able to draw, for starters, whether that's digitally on hand. Its question is really, do you need that? But our reality, it's the ability to make a story out of anything, really. And it's just it's the animation isn't the thing. So with the tools that we use, you don't have to do any of this. It does it all for you. It's your ideas around it. So anyone who can have those ideas, or when I want someone doing that, they can do this. It's a couple of mouse clicks. So there's no specific technical skills that are needed other than to be able to access the internet.
Any more questions from the floor? Okay, cool. So I'm going to go and watch Jaws, Star Wars, and I'm making an animation after this. So brilliant session from both our speakers. Thank you very much. Oh.